Well, thank you for joining us today. I am Jenine Garrelick, a Senior Managing Director at MFS Investment Management, and welcome to our fourth event in our series called Your Time is an Asset. You know, we had one mission when we created Your Time is an Asset, and that was to make sure that all women out there understood that they face some unique financial challenges. And we wanted to provide a forum of support and education so that all women could take charge of their financial future. Our past three events, we talked about tips to get started. We talked about ways to boost your financial confidence. We attacked that very large topic of caregiving. And most importantly, we also highlighted that there are times when you're going to want to reach out for help. And so we provided some questions to help you do so. So who is MFS Investment Management and why are we here? Well, I'd say why wouldn't we be here? Because we are the company that back in 1924 invented the mutual fund. We brought Wall Street to Main Street. And today the mutual fund is one of the most popular investment vehicles as it allows all individuals access to investments, not just the ultra wealthy. And over the past 90 years, we have partnered with financial advisors who help investors like yourself reach their long-term goals. Now, 90 years is a long time, but let's talk about your time and your time today. So today's event, we called it A Time for You, because we know that as we age and time goes by, we will enter different stages of our lives. And those stages of our lives will prevent various financial opportunities and obstacles. You combine that with the fact that the role of women has changed. Whether it's the work we choose or the options we have, we will all go on a financial journey, and we want to make sure yours is a positive one. And in order to help with the financial journey in this panel, I have three amazing panelists that are going to give us some great advice. So if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Emily Wrightson. I'm a director at Cammack Retirement Group. And I came out of school really not knowing a lot about financial planning or financial basics, but it wasn't until I started my career that I had the opportunity to work in a one-on-one setting with individuals talking about their retirement plans. And at that time, I really got to see how little people knew about investments and planning, and that really set the stage for what I do now, which is work a lot more on the institutional level, helping our clients design and manage retirement plans for their employees. So I hope to bring that perspective to this panel, and excited to be here.
I'm Heather Ettinger, and I'm the founder of Luma Wealth Advisors. And I want to start by thanking both MFS and Redbook. This is a terrific opportunity. Essentially, Luma Wealth was founded after I've been in the industry about 30 years, and for about 20 of those years, been working with women in transition. So we introduced Luma to kind of codify and expand that relationship, because women, managing money for them is really not so much about the investments, it's really about managing their lives. So we build a sense of community of resources around them to help them manage their lives.
Hi, I'm Jane Francisco. I'm the Editorial Director of Redbook. And I have not spent my career focusing on finances, but I have spent the last 20 years working with women, creating content for women, and hearing from our audiences about what matters to them and what's going on in their lives. And one of the things we talk about a lot is value and how you can get the best value for your money and your time, and finance really runs underneath all of that in terms of at every stage of life for our audiences.
Great. So Jane, I am going to ask you the first question. What challenges do Redbook readers face early on in their lives?
So we conducted a big survey of all of our readers. In fact, it was across all of the lifestyle groups, so we had quite a few people participate. And our audiences in the 25 to 34, the top of mind was buying a house. That came out, so that was over 50%, that was sort of one of the things that was up there. And then the next 4 was pretty much even. So getting or paying for an education was almost 40%, and having a child or planning to have a child, same, well, 35%, and then marriage. So really this stage of life is all about planning and building your life. You're sort of just starting to take hold of it yourself and really looking at what's next.
Thank you. All right, I am going to have Heather, if you don't mind, answer the next one. Based on these reader concerns, what are some immediate steps that women can take to start their financial journey off on the right track?
So the good news is that I think women actually are fantastic at managing their money when they take the time to really think about it. So when they take the time to align it with their values and goals, as opposed to necessarily how are the markets doing. The bad news is, as we say in our office, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So they really do need to kind of start with the budget. What income do they have? What expenses do they have? What, as I like to say, are the necessary expenses, not necessarily the trips to Starbucks that add up to thousands of dollars every year. How can they manage debt? How can they manage their credit scores? Very important pieces like that. But the second point I really want to drive home is about negotiating that first salary. So while 57% of men negotiate their first salary, only 7% of women do. Here's the good news. In that same study, they showed that 89% of those women that did got what they were looking for. So it's really important to not only negotiate, and to give you an idea, what that costs over a lifetime of work is probably $1 million to $1.5 million in difference in earnings. It's benefits, as we've talked about with retirement, and other things. So it's really, really important to negotiate that. And it's not just about the salary, it's also about the benefits and other costs that may come up. So just a brief story, my oldest, who's 25, when she first came out of college, was negotiating her first salary, kind of hit the mark with the CEO of the company. And I said to her, okay, well, you have to go to all these industry events. Will she pay for your membership in those organizations, you to attend the event? She went to her new boss, and the woman said, not only will I pay for that, but I'll pay for your parking, I'll pay you overtime, it's great, you're helping me market the company. So really think about the other things that are negotiable that can add up to thousands of dollars.
Heather, that's great advice, and I'm excited you said that because my boss is actually in the audience, so now he can prepare what's going to come up for next year when we talk about compensation.
You need to come to our program, Pay, Perks, and Parachutes.
Awesome,
okay, Jenine?
Thank you. I'm sure he'll pay for me to get there. Emily, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think that just to build off of what you said, Heather, really important to know your benefits and to understand specifically your retirement plan, because that can be a source of, super important in the future and allows you to defer money on a pre-tax basis. So it may cost a little bit less than what you might think. You also want to know if your employer has a match contribution, because if they're going to contribute some to your plan, you don't want to leave that money on the table. So really important to understand that. And time is on your side here. So the sooner you can get money invested in the market, in your retirement plan, it's just going to help you in the long run because of compounding and that whole idea of interest and growth building on that asset base that you have. So definitely encourage everyone out there to explore your benefits if you don't know them already.
Jane, what about you?
Well, so following up on that retirement piece, when I was in my early 20s being on the subway and seeing an ad that was from some financial organization that had a big chart, and it said, if you start saving now in your 20s, this is how much money you'll have when you retire, and if you start in your 30s, this much, in your 40s, and it just sort of went like this. And at that stage, I think sometimes it's hard to think about getting started. You're so focused on all of those other things, getting your life going and so on. And one of the things that's great now is that there are now apps that you can just get on your phone that can just make it fun and easy to start, just like that dip your toe in. So there's Mint, and there's one called Stash, and a couple of these you can do like $5 a week or $5 a day, thinking about the Starbucks coffee or whatever. And there's even one called Acorns, where if you like to shop, it'll top it up, and you can say how much. You can have it top up to the next dollar. So if you spent $48.03, it'll take the 97 cents and knock it into your investment portfolio, or up to the next $5 or $10 or $20. So easy ways to kind of get going, and I think that's part of it, sort of just getting the ball rolling. And I think once you, because I look back at my fear at I haven't started, and I sort of ran the other way, just getting something going so that you feel like you've got a habit starting to form.
Great. Emily, what are some common mistakes that you can see women making when it comes to retirement planning, and how can they correct them early on?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that I often heard and hear still when I talk to participants is, I can't afford to save. I don't have enough money. And that kind of goes back to what Heather said with the budgeting. Really important to save for your retirement. You have to save for that woman in the future, because she needs that. She's going to need that money. So save for yourself. Pay yourself first. I really encourage that. So just getting into that automatic habit of having money come out. And so that's easy to do. And a lot of retirement plans will allow you to set up an ability for you to increase your contribution once a year by a percentage point or two. So build up. Even if you're nervous about starting a contribution and having money come out of your paycheck, a small percentage you might not even notice. So that's one thing that I see. And the other thing that I see is that as people move through their careers, and we're in a world now where a lot of people switch jobs every couple of years. So switching that job, make sure you continue with your saving. Don't leave that retirement plan and all those contributions behind. You may want to consider consolidating your accounts, you may not, but continue that contribution. You don't want to let 6 months go by or a year go by and you haven't put anything away for yourself. So just a few ideas there.
Great. Heather?
I think Emily covered most of it, but a couple other things to think about. One is our most precious commodity is time. That's what we're talking about today. And I think because of it, a lot of women don't go to all the meetings that their companies offer. So we're talking about retirement plans, but also even the health plan. Maybe there's a flex savings plan, health savings account, and we don't go to the meetings. Therefore, we don't get the information because we kind of don't like the fact that it feels like people are selling us stuff. Well, there's a huge cost to not participating in those benefits. And sometimes it's also, you're paying more in taxes than you should be because some of those are tax deferred accounts as well. So I think that's one, is really understanding your benefits beyond just the retirement accounts. What are the other things that you can use to save money for your future? I think secondly, most women think they don't have enough money to work with an advisor. There are advisors out there that are happy to work with women of all levels. It's great to see some of the young advisors really trying to work with their peers. We've got young advisors in our firm who are creating a platform just for their peers. So, and your advisor also should be looking not just at your personal savings, but they also should be incorporating your retirement plan and looking at everything holistically based on what your needs are. So those are some of the things that we see most often, is that women are great at looking at the big picture. I mean, we're always juggling so many things. Well, just take an hour every week and really sit down and say, what am I doing to plan for my future? And I think that time will be well spent if you look at your benefits and maximizing them.
Jane?
So, I mean, I think in terms of the biggest mistake that women make in general, and certainly at that moment when you're starting to focus on family and so on, is the taking care of yourself. And we see that with health, and I think with finances, and that idea of taking some time. And I think as this conversation goes on and we talk about the life stages as we go, that idea that in the long term it's really important to have a plan that's for yourself as well as your family. And again, I think that's part of the thing. You're getting going, you have so much on your plate that you leave the taking care of yourself sort of on the back burner. And I think you just have to start to make that a bit of a priority. Again, speaking for Redbook, with your health as well, but certainly with your finances, and taking that moment to really think about where that's going and how you're going to take care of yourself through all your life stages.
Yeah. You know, when you're young, it's hard to think you will get old, but it happens. So Emily, in the workplace, what are some overlooked financial resources and key employee benefits? How can women ask their employers about these tools?
Yeah, so you're probably aware of the general benefits that everybody knows about, the health, the retirement, but you may have some other ones that could be really instrumental in developing your financial picture and your plan and could save you some money. So important to have that dialogue with human resources and really understand. I've talked to people that didn't realize they had life insurance options. So you can get life insurance at a pretty competitive rate often through your employer. So that's one key thing. Another idea is that educational stipends. So your employer may offer you a stipend to go back to school and get an advanced degree like an MBA or a master's and help you build that resume and help you pay for it, which is pretty amazing. So there's a lot of benefits out there that you can take advantage of. Wellness is another one, and we've talked a little bit about that, but the push towards encouraging their employees to go to the gym. A lot of companies have a reimbursement option where if you go to the gym a certain number of times a month, they'll credit you back, and that can save you some money. So just being aware of all of these things that are out there that can help you and save you some money.
Great. Heather?
I think Emily pretty much covered it. I think it's, again, just really taking the time to go through all the benefits. And I know it's a lot of different providers, but they are there to serve you. So, remember that. I think sometimes we're hesitant because we don't know what questions to ask. Well, there are all sorts of resources, and I think we'll continue to give you more. And MFS has great resources on their site.
Well, one of the things we talked about, and again, this was top of mind for women in that sort of 25 to 35, 40, is the whole planning for kids. And one of the things, I work with almost all women, and many of them have had children while I've been working with them. And the whole maternity leave piece is one that I think often people, once they find out they're pregnant, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, how does this work? Like, what am I gonna get? How much time do I get? How am I gonna deal with this financially? What's the impact on my work and so on? So I would encourage, not what I did, because I found out I was pregnant, and then I went in and I was like, okay, now what? How's this gonna work? Is to talk to HR about what happens in your company. And then one of the pieces of feedback I get from the women I work with is that sometimes it's almost better to speak to someone who's recently gone through it. And what have they learned, especially if they work for your organization, and so they have a little bit of an insight into how things work at your organization, but also what worked for them and how they managed it, so that you can just sort of get that planning going. Because once you have the kids, then that's the next layer of financial focus.
Yes, and I think it's also important to add that benefits change. So companies are constantly updating their benefits, so it's always important to ask. All right, so let's talk about middle life stage. And I don't know how we want to define middle life stage. I have a feeling I'm in it, but if my mom was here, she'd say you don't wear pleather pants if you're in middle life stage. But why don't
Ageless,
we
like to say?
Yeah, say the 40 to what
Well,
should
so
we?
when we did our survey, we did 35 to 44 and 45 to 54, which is not to say, I think we're kind of getting a bit of, again, it depends on where you're at with family building and so on.
Yep.
But when we talked about where the priorities were or where the anxieties were and so on, we had buying a home at the earlier stages of that. So mid-30s, that's something that's 20s and 30s, again, depending where you're at with your family and so on. Having a child's right up there. And marriage. So again, that depending on life stage. And then as we move into the 40s, divorce from 35 to 54, divorce was up there for most women. It didn't come up in the 20s and early 30s, obviously. And then the buying and planning a home, same. Like that, it continued to be something, and whether it's about the home you already have or maybe looking at your next home as your family grows and so on, taking care of a sick relative or yourself was something that started coming up in the sort of late 40s. And then retirement really, our readers didn't really start talking about retirement until they got into the late 40s in terms of actively, it's in my top 3 concerns.
Interesting.
So,
Heather, what are some life events that women may be faced with during this stage that could impact their financial plan that they set in their early years?
Well, I think Jane mentioned some of them, but let me be even kind of more specific as a framework for this. So certainly one is marriage, and there's some great resources out there about marriage or partnerships where you're coming together. And what I would say is always make sure you kind of keep your individual power from your money, from the standpoint of know what you bring into the marriage or the partnership, and make sure you always have credit cards in your name and other things like that. Saving for kids' education, I can tell you, it's really expensive. So, and the nice thing is with 529 plans, that you now have an opportunity to use that deferral for education also for high school, private high school education, should that be an option that you want to explore. Luma, since yesterday was 529, just put out a social post on 529s yesterday if you want to find out some more information on that. And then, so I think they're kind of the plan for life events. Raising kids is really expensive. Mine are in their 20s, and I would tell you they're no less expensive, even when they're on their own. Healthcare that we've talked about. But then sadly, there are also, as we like to say, life interferes, the life events that come about that you aren't expecting. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is that second to infidelity, financial stress is the largest contributing factor to divorce. And for many people who get divorced, it's come as a surprise. Maybe, they didn't know that it was coming. And the problem is, if you aren't on top of your finances, that is not the best time to all of a sudden have to put it in high gear. There are different services you can use out there to help collect the information, but that is a life event that can come along and really catch you by surprise. And if you don't have your ducks in order, it can really set you back. And a lot of times you don't even know all the expenses that are going to be coming up with it. But the statistics definitely show that both spouses are worse off after a divorce. So have those financial discussions up front, because it, as I said, it is a big contributor to divorce, being financial stress.
Emily.
Yeah, I think Heather covered a lot of it, but I'll just say, I think for a lot of people out there, and Jane, you touched on it too, you kind of find yourself pregnant and then you say, oh, let's figure that out now. One of the things that I think is so important and big is the idea that a lot of women come out of the workforce to raise their children, and they leave their job, and maybe it's just for a couple years and they get back in, but understanding just from a planning perspective what that can do to your financial picture and how that can impact your salary, your retirement benefits, how much you're paying into Social Security. It's kind of maybe things you didn't think about. So the cost of daycare, I think national average is right around $9,500 a year for a child under 5. If you have multiple children, it's a lot of money that you're spending on this child care, and a lot of stress, and they're out of your care. So nobody can put a price on that, but I think it's important to take a look at all of those factors and figure out what makes the most sense for you and your family. And the Center for American Progress has a calculator that you can go and you can plug in some of those metrics and kind of see what that impact will be. And maybe it's just for education purpose, and maybe it changes your mind or it gives you a different perspective, but a useful tool that's out there.
Jane, what would you add?
Well, I mean, in terms of, hopefully soon we're going to stop talking about the doom and gloom, but in terms of looking out for things that you might not be focusing on. So job loss was also one of the concerns on the top of mind of readers, but one of the ones that we hear about and write stories about, because usually it's such a difficult piece, is the idea of losing a spouse. So the concept of becoming a widow, I think, when you are later in life, that's something you think about. It's actually one of the focuses that you prepare for. But when you're younger, and if for some unforeseen reason you end up losing a spouse, that can be a very difficult time to have to try to figure out finances when you're dealing with the trauma within the context of your family. So that would be one of the things just to sort of start thinking about, and hopefully by being on top of it, you'll never have to face it. But I mean, it is one of the things that is just sort of your eyes on the ball of your family and your career and job and so on. And this is one of those things that can just come out of nowhere that if you haven't planned for it can really be traumatic.
Well, this is uplifting. See? So let's talk about another life event. We talked about kids. And thank goodness kids are so cute and comical, because that's the only way we keep going sometimes. But they are expensive. And I think it's probably important to also recognize that there are times when we need to take care of ourselves before we take care of them. And I think a lot of people, we've talked recently, some headlines where I think it was a 30-year-old would not move out of the parents' basement, which was absolutely amazing. That was probably just a beautifully decorated basement, because obviously the child did not, well, the adult did not want to move out. But the reality is there are so many adult children who come back home, right? And that is something that so many people have been faced with. And one of the things that I'll share just personally, because I have a wide range of children. My oldest will be 28 this summer, but then I also have a 10 and an 8-year-old. And it was a very exciting time when he finally moved out. And one of the things that helped, and he helped by giving me an amazing gift. And I just want to share this gift because, first of all, it was in his budget. I think it cost less than $5. But I got so tired of him asking me to pay for things, because that was the biggest problem. He was not financially independent yet. And then I just started saying no. And then I said no again. And no again. And we got into this pattern. And so he found this amazing gift. So I didn't even have to say it anymore. It has many different ways. Do you hear that? It just, you don't even have to stress your voice box anymore. And so I just want to encourage so many women out there. We love our kids, but there comes a time when you just have to say no. And they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. So we'll get back to that at the end, but just thought we'd lighten it up just a little bit here. So we did talk about kids returning home. So what advice, besides what I just shared with you, would you have of making sure that kids don't stay in your basement until they're in their 30s? Any advice?
Well, I'll grab that one. So I'll share with you from raising 3 kids to hopefully be financially responsible, some of the things that worked well and some of the things that don't work so well. But I do believe you start as young as possible, and it's really a values-based discussion. It's not so much how much you have, but that what the family's values are, what you choose to spend money on. And so we started with our kids actually when they were in 1st grade. And I'll skip kind of the early years because that's really more focused on giving money away and then saving for things that they want. But that's kind of the basics of it. But beginning in high school, actually put the kids on a budget, full budget, paying for toiletries, clothes, those types of things. And if you've never done it, just back your way into building the budget for them. But it's really, really important to start building those skills of managing a budget before they go to college. Because the largest contributing factor to kids dropping out of college is not academic performance, it is debt. So we need to get to them sooner. So here's the funny part though, Jenine, is so the girls, I have 2 girls and a boy. So the girls get it and they're like, wow, you buy 5 razors at one point, you know, in the bonus pack, that's a lot cheaper than buying them individually. And they start figuring this stuff out. One of my daughters chooses her apartment by being close to Target. And so they start to figure those things out and what their budgets are. Well, my son decides, he comes along, start the same thing with him, and he's like, oh, I got this. I just won't buy deodorant or underwear, and then I have more money to spend on other stuff. I'm like, no, dude, that's not quite how this works. But in all seriousness, you know, having them make those choices. And here's the interesting part. So my daughter's cell phone broke, her iPod broke in the days when they had iPods. Yes, I know. And I said, hey, I'm going to help you buy a new one. And she was very self-righteous and said, no, I'm saving up the money. I'm going to do it myself. So I think that's really important. The other piece I would say, in addition to aligning with values and really setting expectations, is also allowing them to make mistakes. That's really important, because I guarantee you the mistake they make while living under your roof is going to be a lot less expensive than the mistake that they make out on their own. My oldest daughter's was iTunes. Click, 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 and all of a sudden she was $20 over. Well, that's a lot better than being $200 or $2,000. So it is important to make those mistakes and be able to talk about what's the consequence of the mistake when they're smaller mistakes and not gargantuan ones.
Great point.
Well, with an 11-year-old, I now have a plan for high school, and I like it. It's interesting when your kids are younger, the idea of talking to them about money. And last night, my son said to me, so how much money do you make a week? And I was like, what do you mean? What do you need? I mean, a month. How much money do you make a month? And I said, well, what do you need this information for? I'm just wondering, oh, how much money do you make a year? And in this conversation, I'm trying to negotiate, like, how much information is the right information for him to understand? What does he want? I didn't get from him, because I say this is maybe sort of stereotypical, but as a boy, he doesn't usually communicate very well. He gave up when I started probing on why he wanted to know. But that sort of, and that negotiation piece where I said, if you pay 10%, we can get you a new computer. So he calculated this out, because how much money he had. And then he came back to me the next week and he was like, okay, if I pay 10%, these are all the things I can get. And I was like, no, it was one conversation about the computer. It wasn't just, now this is the computer game I want to get, and I'll pay 10% and you'll pay 90%. But it's interesting just to see how they learn to negotiate, how they sort of follow your lead. And while, I don't know, it's hard not to make mistakes yourself. I guess that's part of it while you're going through it. But
I think that's part of it, though, Jane, is sharing the mistakes that we have made. I think that's really important, because we set an expectation otherwise that is too high for them to reach, and quite frankly, it's not the truth. It's not realistic. So I think, even going through that 2008, 2009 period where I think every family had to cut back, it was a great time to talk to kids about, okay, what are the priorities of the family? For us, it was education for our kids. We're still going to go on a family trip, but we're not going to fly. We're going to drive. So those kinds of things I think are good to share with them, that even we make mistakes and we got to hone it in.
I think that's great advice. And I am going to leverage all of that with my 10 and 8-year-old, because my other plan was just when they graduated high school, I was going to sell the house and just downsize to a 1-bedroom. So there was no basement for them to go in. So Emily, let me ask you, with more women choosing not to marry, how should single women be preparing for their financial futures?
Well, I think for single women, especially, we know a couple of things about women. We know that they live longer. We know that they tend to come out of the workforce and they may be a caregiver. And we know that they may not make as much money as their male counterparts. So keeping all of those things in mind, we have to kind of design a financial plan or think about them a little bit differently. And for single women especially, I think it's very important to have an emergency fund. Because they don't have that benefit of the dual income household, if something should happen with a job, and I know job loss in the middle of the life is a big concern, not having that liquid money available to be able to access could be a big issue. And so making sure you have 6 to 9 months of living expenses available is really important. Also life insurance. A lot of single women may think, okay, well, I don't have any dependents, or maybe they do, maybe they have children, but you want to be cognizant of, in the event something happened to you unforeseen, that you are able to support those dependents, or that even for your family, you may have a mortgage or a car loan or some other expenses out there that a life insurance policy would cover. So those are the two big items for single women to focus on.
Heather?
The one other one I would add is health savings account, which is an opportunity to put money away. And one of my female business partners is single, and she looks at it as her long-term care insurance. So she's putting away the money today. It's growing tax deferred in investment vehicles, and she looks at that as actually a great way to save for her health care and all down the road. The second thing I might mention is, so in some of the studies that I've done, 32% of single women were actually supporting kids in the next generation. And I think our industry does a disservice of not really understanding what's unique about single women. We make a lot of assumptions that they, of course, wouldn't be supporting someone in the next generation. So I do think it's really important for the women, if they are working with an advisor, to be forthcoming and saying, no, I really want to help educate my nieces and nephews, or I have, plans to travel with them, and make sure that gets built into the financial plan, because with enough time, you can build up a nice resource there to do those things that are fun goals, to your point, Jane, for them to save for.
Jane?
Well, and on that front, and I think this is for single women and women who are running a family, et cetera, that whole idea of, and we did a story on how women were using their disposable income or turning their disposable income into savings for things that they could look forward to. And I think that idea, when, we talk a lot about the rainy day, and it's really important, and it's an important part of how we plan our finances. But at the same time, the money that you make and work hard for, it's nice if it's something that you can look forward to spending and so on. And so one of the stories, which I just think is a lot of fun, and this was a group of women, some single and some married, who got together every 2 to 3 months and would go out for dinner. And they decided together to meet at each other's apartments or houses and take the $100 that they would spend on each of these dinners and put it into an account. And after a couple of years, they were not living in New York, and they all flew to New York and stayed here for a weekend and went to Broadway and so on. And it was all paid for by themselves, but it felt like it was like lottery-free money. And they all got cash to spend and so on, and what a great memory, something to look forward to. And it didn't feel like they had to save up for it. They actually spent money they were going to spend anyways. And we did a whole series of stories on that, including purchasing an apartment in Paris, that it's also possible to focus on your finances in a way of some of the things you can look forward to, as well as making sure that you have a fallback if something goes in the wrong direction.
Oh, I love that. All right, so let's talk about the late life stage, that so far ahead of us stage, right? Real far ahead of us. Tell me what the Redbook readers are concerned about with their
Well,
later
the
life.
losing a job continues to be, and I think this is one of the real issues at this moment for us, is that ageism in the workforce is real. And I think that's something that at certain points, as industries evolve so quickly, that there's a feeling of being redundant or being sort of at a top of a pay scale. So that's a big concern for people. Taking care of a sick relative, and of course, we talked about caregiving last time, but this comes more sharply into focus. Divorce, retirement, the economy is another thing that came up. And that came up along the way, but I think at the late life stage, particularly as you've lived through the economy changing, I think the current economy is something that's really top of mind. That ties into one of the things we heard was about downsizing, so husband's job being downsized, therefore having to cut, and the cost of living has continued to go up, and another one was haven't had a pay increase in X number of years, et cetera. So I love reporting on the good news.
All right, Heather and Emily, this is going to be for you guys. For women who may be getting a late start on saving for retirement, what tactics can they use to make up for lost time? You want to start?
Sure. So you're not going to like this answer.
Okay.
But no one wants to hear this. You may have to consider working longer. So delaying your retirement. It sounds like an obvious one. Some people can't do it. So if you can't do that, or that doesn't factor into your plan, start saving as much as you can now. Kind of carve out, go through your budget, figure out what do I not need? Do I not need those $5 Starbucks or that expensive gym membership that I don't really use? Figure out where that excess money can come from and put that away for yourself. And you may also have to invest that money a little bit more aggressively than you may have previously thought or wanted to, because you need to make up for that lost time. So those are a couple of things that you could consider doing. Working part-time can also be a nice transition if you can find a couple of hours here or there that you can work, rather than going from having a steady paycheck down to zero. Having a little bit of cash can help provide that buffer between, retirement and Social Security coming in. So a couple of ideas.
I think Emily really covered it extremely well. The only other point I'd make is that, again, it comes down to really taking the time to do this. In a study that we did of breadwinner women, 46% said they knew they were leaving money on the table with benefits of their employer. So again, I know it sounds repetitive, but it's so important to understand what your benefits are and to make sure that you are taking advantage of them, because it's money on the table, and it's not just salary or compensation, but this can add up to thousands upon thousands of dollars. And the reason that's so important is because as women, we're living longer, and it's estimated that our retirement healthcare costs are going to be 37% higher than the average male, which translates to about $200,000. So we do have to find ways to kind of build those benefits up so that we can support ourselves later.
So that actually led right into the next question of the fact that we are outliving men and what we should be aware of healthcare costs. Is there anything else you would add other than that massive number that we can plan for today? Anything else on healthcare? We got a plan for it. I think that's it.
One of the things I was going to say, just jumping in on all of this, when you get into the technical areas, Social Security and all of the different benefits and so on, my observation, and I feel like I can speak for people who work in the industry, is this is a place where having a financial advisor can be such a help. Because it can feel overwhelming to try to figure out, what am I actually going to have? And someone who can help you navigate that and help you not just with the planning piece, but just even understanding what you may be facing, whether it's related to healthcare costs and so on, is just having that person who you can ask questions to and so on. And I think, women are getting better and better at delegating and having this kind of sort of outsourcing this piece, not having to try to figure it out all yourself. I think that's, a lot of peace of mind can come with that.
So, Jane, I'm really glad you mentioned that. I think the other really important thing is that, women are not a niche. And when we go out and look for a medical practitioner, you're not going to go to a brain surgeon if you need heart surgery, right? So we should look for advisors who specialize in whether it's that phase of life or that life transition. And that's a really important piece to making sure that you are getting the best advice for your particular situation.
And I mean, one of the things, I may be answering a future question, but one of the things we had sort of discussed was that whole, sometimes, and our readers say this, I don't know where to start. And, one of the first things we say is, well, if you needed someone to cut your hair, where would you start? You'd probably ask some of your friends, hey, I love your hair. Where do you get it done? Or do you like your hairstylist, et cetera? And I think that's one of the places you can start, is just by talking to friends about how they manage it, and if they have someone that they trust or that they like, that they work with. It's a place to start anyway.
I think that's great, and I'm glad you brought that up because there is a reason for over 90 years we've partnered with financial advisors because you find a good one, they are a great partner for life. Along with the great hairstylist, right? Can't beat good bangs. So the last question I'm gonna ask for all of you, but I'll start with Heather. Social Security is a major source of income in retirement, especially for women. What questions should women consider with their spouse before applying?
So this is where an advisor becomes really critical because Social Security is incredibly complex because if you're in a traditional marriage, there are benefits to delaying your own Social Security filings and taking spousal support first and vice versa. So it is pretty complex. I also would give you one tidbit, which is if you're thinking about a divorce, try to stay married for 10 years because you can get spousal benefits even from somebody you're divorced from if you've been married at least 10 years, so apologies, but that is an important piece of information to know. I'm happily married, thank you very much. But I do think it's really important to have an advisor come in and really help you understand all the different timing as to when you take the different benefits and also, of course, when you withdraw on your own retirement benefits. It's not a simple answer because it depends on tax rates and different tax strategies that you should be putting in place and different filings that you should be doing for Social Security.
Emily?
No, definitely echo that sentiment because Social Security, there's so many nuances, so many variables. You can boost your own benefit by taking your spouse's benefit and deferring on your own. So just playing around with all those numbers, I know Social Security Administration has calculators and tools that can help you, but nothing beats sitting down with somebody and working through something that's going to be so custom to each individual couple. So I would say that. And the other thing is too, if you're single, you know, that may be another consideration that you want to talk to an advisor about because you may decide that you want to delay your benefits so that you can increase them. 62 is the earliest that you can take Social Security, but you're going to have a reduction in your benefits. So kind of playing all of those numbers out and keeping in mind that you're going to live a long time in retirement is really key.
Jane, anything to add?
Well, just speaking to the point about divorce, I think if that's something that you think might be on the horizon for you, and this is probably the case at any stage of life, but perhaps speaking to your financial advisor on your own might be something to think about. Just to look at where you're at and helping make a plan, not to say that finances are the reason to, you know, make relationship decisions, but you may find that it helps you with that. And certainly it would help you with preparation if that's something you were thinking about. So I think that idea, and maybe it's not just divorce, but the idea of having a conversation with a financial advisor on your own may be something you want to do, just so that you really understand where you stand as well. That's not to say going against sort of doing something as a couple, but for you to understand if anything were to change in your life, where you're at and how you can best plan for yourself.
Well, I think it's great advice. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just trying to take control of our future.
Take care of yourself.
Yep, take care of ourselves first. So we actually have run out of time. Believe it or not, we went through all the life stages that we possibly could have, and we have covered a lot. So I think to wrap it up, it's really important to understand it's not about knowing everything or having all the answers. It's really about awareness and having the confidence to be able to leverage the resources and the tools that are out there. So I would highly encourage everybody, if you have a chance, there's a website, yourtimeisanasset.com. I'll say it one more time. Yourtimeisanasset.com. It is a website that MFS and Redbook have partnered together to fill it up with lots of resources and tools that everybody can leverage. So I do want to thank our panelists today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I think it's really important to continue the dialogue, so feel free to follow us on social media. And I will leave you with one last thank you. This is not Oprah. You do not have cars that we gave out, but in your bags, you all do have your own Very No button. So enjoy it. Thank you so much.